Okay, now I want to turn to what the paradox of inquiry, Meno's paradox, in that Socrates is going to solve in this pretty peculiar fashion, is. And let me just, before even talking about paradox, you notice I'm saying we're looking at something that's written on page 144, and then I have this funny number, 80 C to E. That's something called a Stephanus number. It's named after the person who originally edited the Greek manuscripts. So let's jump over to and take a look at the textbook. You notice we're now at the bottom of page 143. That's at the top of our page, where we see Meno, as I'm highlighting right over here. It says Meno 80A through AD, comma 96B through 99E. As I mentioned, these are the Stephanus numbers that relate to the original Greek manuscript. And you see they're numbered sequentially, and then A, B, C, D. Well, if you take a look over on the right side of the page, right at the top, remember it says starting at 80A, we have the number 80 there. That's the number that we're talking about. So if we quickly jump back to the PowerPoint slide, which I missed, I said we're going to page 145, 80 C to E. Now let's jump back into our textbooks. And you guys should learn how to do this in your textbook following along. So there's 80, and I said C to E. So let me scroll down. We're now on page 144. If we're looking on the left side, I said 80 was C to E. So C, D, E. Let me scroll down a little so we'll get that portion right up on the page. So now I'm just hoping I can orient you to the text, because during the course of the semester we're going to be going through the text. We're going to be looking at what the text says and trying to figure out what exactly Plato and our editor, Professor Annis, is telling us about all these things. Okay, so that's the portion that we're looking at. You should be on that page. Do this in your book. It's not a movie. Don't sit there and watch. You're not going to learn. You learn by doing. Find this in your textbook. Now, I wanted to call your attention to certain passage. I said CD Socrates, so that I could produce one thing in return, Meno, how are you going to search for this? Which is where the paradox is coming up. So you see right towards the top of the page, and find it in your book. If you do it once, you'll be able to do it all. So I could produce one for you in return. I mean, there's something strange going on at the beginning of the dialogue. And keep in mind, there's something that has already happened before here in the dialogue. It starts out, one of the questions, or the question in the dialogue starts, is excellence, and excellence meaning, is virtue, is moral excellence, is the right way of doing things teachable, or is it not teachable? And there's a whole discussion of what excellence is between Socrates and Meno before we get here. Meno is sure he knows what it is. He had a teacher who was a sophist that he was sure had the answer. After some questioning, and this is pretty typical for a Socratic dialogue, that is a dialogue written by Plato in which Socrates is the main character. You start basically, if you're looking at the scenario, they're same scenario for all of them. Somebody's walking down the street, Socrates, he encounters a friend. How's it going? What's happening? Yeah, well, I'm glad. Meno said, I'm glad I'm able to be virtuous, or whatever. Oh, well, what exactly does that mean? Socrates then starts asking a bunch of questions, and the result is that the person who thought he knew something is shown not to have known anything at all. So that's the way these things are going to work, and we'll be looking at a bunch of Platonic dialogues, Socratic dialogues during the course of the semester as we proceed through the problems of philosophy that they're trying to answer. So that's what happened, and then we had this whole discussion of, what's going on with this, you're like this electric ray, and, comparing me to this, I numb people. We'll get into all that. Let's not worry. Just think of it as kind of the opening dialogue in a movie. But now we're getting down to the critical part. This is where the paradox of inquiry starts. He's talking about a comparison, so I could produce one in return. I know this about handsome people. He starts. Meno says, "Oh, you're like this electric ray, which is a fish." I actually looked it up on the internet. If you're that interested, let me bounce over to an internet browser. I don't think I have one live, so I will pop one up, my Google browser, and I will go to Google, and I will do a search for electric ray fish, and look at what pops up already. We're seeing images for an electric ray fish. This flat fish, which is what's described. Over here we get a nice description. So the internet sometimes contains a whole bunch of very important and interesting information, and if we go into Wikipedia, I think I looked at it earlier, it actually mentions Socrates in here, but it tells them that they're interesting fish, and if you read, perhaps the best known member of the genus is the genus torpedo, which in some of the translations, by the way, it's called the torpedo. This isn't a class in biology, but just so you guys understand, if you're ever lost, he starts calling this an electric ray. You don't know what's going on. You guys are really fortunate. You have the internet that you can jump into. The same thing if you don't know what a word means. You can go right onto the internet, find out what the word means. Okay, so let us go back to our text now that we know he compares him to the electric ray. He says, I know this about handsome people. They enjoy being compared to things. It is in their interest, as the comparisons for handsome people are themselves handsome. But I'm not going to compare you to anything in return. As for me, if the electric ray is itself numb, and it is this way that it causes others to be numb, kind of paralyzed, shocks your brain, then I am like it, but otherwise not. For it's not that having an abundance of answers myself I cause others to be at a loss, but rather I am most definitely at a loss myself. And it is in this way that I cause others to be at a loss as well. Now let me just remind you, you looked at the clip from the Bill and Ted Excellent Experience movie. The guys, those two eminent scholars, travel off to in their time machine to ancient Greece, and they pick up Socrates, but in the process they're looking up at wherever Socrates' school is, and Plato's, we know, was called the Academy. I'm not sure whether Socrates was actually conducting a school like that, but it was good for the movie. And whoever it is, I don't remember who's Bill and who's Ted in that movie, the one genius looks at the other genius and he says, "Hey, isn't that Socrates? We know who that guy is." And he says, "Look him up in the book." And the other character looks it up in the book, and the first guy says, "Yeah, look it up under Socrates." So he looks up, so you guys should be able to spell Socrates, Socrates. And he looks it up, and what does he read? He reads something to the effect that, Socrates was the wisest man in ancient times, that he thought that he didn't know anything, but he discovered that at least he knew that he didn't know anything. Everybody else thought they knew everything. So it was a big joke. And he says, "Yeah, dude, that's us. We don't know anything." Okay, but that's kind of the the saga of Socrates, that he really didn't think that he knew anything, and he'd ask people whether he knew things. And in fact, to tell you a little bit more of the story, Socrates was tried and put to death. He was put to death for blasphemy. That is, he was denying the gods of Athens. It was a whole trial. It was a trumped-up charge. It was a tampered jury. And as a result, he got convicted. God was put to death. Now, the reason he was really put to death was he had this annoying habit of walking around with kind of the rich and famous of those days, the jet setters, the young kids, the wealthy kids. They didn't drive Ferraris in those days. They didn't jet around the world like they do today, maybe. Going to the clubs in Manhattan, going to Los Angeles, the capitals of London, Paris, wherever they go, the Far East, Tokyo. What they did is they used to hang out with some of them. Wealthy guys used to hang out with Socrates as he would go around and ask all the people who were influential back in ancient Greece, guys like the mayor of the city. Think about somebody going up to Michael Bloomberg, the mayor of New York City, and asking him questions about how should you govern things, what is justice. And you could imagine Bloomberg getting a little bit frustrated with this guy after he tries to answer the question, and the guy proves that he doesn't know anything. So that's where we are kind of in the story, just to give you a little background so the whole story makes a little bit more sense. So what he's telling it, Meno says, hey, look, you're just playing with people. You have a way of driving them crazy that they can't answer it. He says, look, I'm not doing this on purpose. The only reason I'm doing this is because I truly do not know the answer. So he says, okay, let's continue. And now we're down in the area of D. He says, and now as far as excellence is concerned, moral excellence. So we're right now down here. Find yourself on the page. It's the one, the line where D is. I don't know what it is. You perhaps knew before you came into contact with me, but now you're like someone who doesn't know. All the same, I want to consider it with you and to join with you in searching for whatever it is. That is, all these dialogues are looking for an answer. He's working with another character, trying to find an answer. In this case, what excellence is.